Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the public assurance meeting on Monday, the 18th of December. First of all, have we got any apologies we need to note, please?
We have apologies from Mr. Phil Clark, the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner. Okay, and I understand that the Chief Constable may need to leave the meeting slightly early.
Yes, thank you, Aubrey. Yep. I was aware of the Chief needing to go and conduct some other business. So brilliant. So welcome everybody to the meeting today. We are going to move the agenda around slightly because of the Chief's other commitment. So we will need to just change that as we
I think we've lost Mark again, haven't we? So in terms of the agenda, I think where we were trying to go was to bring Caroline on earlier, so that Caroline can at least do her presentation while I'm still in the meeting. And then I'm not quite sure whether Mark wants to bring the crime performance and exception reports in earlier, but I'm not sure we'll gain a great deal from doing that. So that was the main piece that we were just considering. So Caroline, that's just to give you a bit of a heads up that you might be on a little sooner than you expected. Sorry, Mark, I was just explaining where we thought we might go with the agenda.
Yeah, so hopefully we won't be defeated by the technology. Hopefully we can keep it all working now. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah,
good stuff. Excellent. Yeah, so we will have a little bit of a jiggle around, and we will do the violence against women and girls piece earlier in the agenda to make sure we can conclude that before you have to go, Chief. Okay, so welcome to everybody that's here today. Just for clarity, if we can sort of go around the virtual room so we can introduce who's here. I'm Marc Jones, the Police and Crime Commissioner. Over to you, Chief.
Thank you, Chris Howard, Chief Constable.
Julia.
Afternoon, Julia Debenham, Deputy Chief Constable.
Joe.
Afternoon, Jo Davison, Director of Strategy and Operations in the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Aubrey.
Afternoon, Aubrey Williams, Research and Performance Officer for the Commission.
Thank you. Caroline.
Good afternoon, I'm Caroline Kilevy. I'm the Chief Executive of YMCA Lincolnshire and attending today in the capacity of Chair of the Violence Against Women and Girls Assurance Panel.
And welcome. And we have supporting today's meeting, Emily and Alison. So thank you for your help both with pulling everything together today. Okay, so before
Mark, we also have Julie with us this afternoon. Sorry.
Oh, apologies, Julie. I missed you out.
No problem. Julie Flynn, Chief Finance Officer to the PCC.
Thank you. Okay. There we go. So just moving on to the Police and Crime Commissioner's update. Probably the biggest thing to update on is the fact that this will be the Chief Constable's last PAM meeting in the position of Chief Constable of Lincolnshire Police, which is something that I think we need to celebrate in the sense that you've achieved a lot, Chris, in those 3 years. It's been a really challenging period of time for you, where we've had an awful lot of transitional change with bringing back an awful lot of services back in-house from the G4S contract, which was handled incredibly well by the team that you headed up. So thank you very much for that. And all of those really challenging things, like making sure all the plans and building blocks and everything's in place to really get the force going in the right direction, were things that were vitally important and have been done really, really well. So thank you very much for that. And as we'll discuss later, we're seeing that hard work starting to show through all the other performance elements of the force, which is really good to see. Personally, I'm very sorry to lose you, but I'm very excited for you for your new opportunity following your retirement from this element of policing as you take on your new national role. So my personal thanks to you for everything you've done for Lincolnshire Police, and obviously we wish you all the very best for the future. And just before I sort of bring you in, I'm sure you'll want to comment on that, just to really say that it obviously means that the process has now started to find the next Chief Constable of Lincolnshire Police, the interviews for which, should applicants apply, which I hope they will take place on the 24th of January. So subject to that process going ahead, we will then be making any further announcements regarding a prospective candidate to put forward to the Police and Crime Panel after that date. So that's quite a lot of change going on there for the force, for Lincolnshire, but it's always a challenging time when we change a Chief Constable. But if there's anything you want to say at that point, Chief, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Commissioner, and thank you for the kind words. I'm not going to speak for long, but just to say it's been a real privilege to be Chief here, and I hadn't expected to be stepping down at 3 years, but life has a way of throwing some curveballs in every now and again, which I've had to respond to, and new opportunities have come along, thankfully about the right time, that have allowed me to take some life decisions that I needed to. So I'm very sad to be stepping away. I think the force, as you say, is in a very strong position now and in quite a healthy state to be moving forward. And I look forward to seeing who the new Chief Constable may be, and wish the force the very best for the future. And I will keep a very close eye on how it gets on. And I doubt that I'll be a stranger either, because I'm remaining in a policing role afterwards. So you will probably see more of me. Okay, thank you.
And you will always be welcome here in Lincolnshire. So I'm sure you'll be coming in to visit every now and again. And I look forward to seeing you when you do. Aubrey, over to you for any public questions. I believe that we have something to ask.
We do, Commissioner, just bear with me a second. So we have a public question, and this question is from the Lincolnshire Strong Voices core group. The Lincolnshire Strong Voices core group have identified that instances of drug misuse are having an impact on young people's feelings of safety while out in their community. How can Lincolnshire Police be more involved in building strong relationships with young people in Lincolnshire and help reduce their feelings of vulnerability?
Thank you for that, Aubrey.
Shall I pick that up then, Commissioner? Okay.
Yes,
okay, thank you. So I think this is one where we actually do an awful lot in terms of trying to engage with young people in the community and building confidence. And we actually have a police education team who deliver face-to-face education sessions to over 9,000 primary school children, 21,000 secondary school children each academic year. We go into 37 primary schools, 64 secondary schools, and also deliver around about 20 or so alternative inputs to alternative education sites and colleges. So there's a huge effort really to engage young people. In terms of the secondary sessions, these are delivered as a partnership vehicle alongside We Are With You, which is a drugs agency, Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership, Fire and Rescue Service, and Lincolnshire County Council. And what we do is take into account the feedback that comes from those meetings and the exercises with young people, looking at the vulnerabilities, making sure that's captured, and then pushing that into programmes of relevant dependency or agency to make sure that we get the right response. All of those disclosures that come out of those sessions, as well as what we do at an informal level within our neighbourhood policing teams, feed into safeguarding teams at schools, and we do ensure that there's appropriate measures put into place to safeguard children where we can. And what I should say is, outside of the educational establishments, there's a lot of work that happens within our communities and within protecting vulnerable people to make sure that we're engaging and understanding the threat and risk to children in our communities and doing everything we can to keep them safe. But there's a lot of work there. Obviously, if there's different ideas about how we can do that, and Lincolnshire Strong Voices core group have suggestions, then I'd be more than happy to hear those and consider those and what that might mean for us in the future.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, just for people that aren't aware, the Lincolnshire Strong Voices core priority group, they're sort of made up of young people from across the county that the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner have sort of pulled together to make sure that we're engaging with young people, hearing their voice as part of our decision making, and also just making sure that we're sort of able to have that two-way dialogue on an ongoing basis. So it's been a really positive piece of work, and there is a really good productive working relationship with the force with that group as well. So we want to build on that, but it is a really positive piece of work. So I'm sure they'll be glad to hear of the other things that are going on in that space. So thank you for that. Okay, moving forward then, we would be going to item 5, which is the crime performance and exception reports, but in the interests of giving the next item as big an airing as we can, we're going to move straight on to the topic for discussion, which is the Violence Against Women and Girls, or VAWG, independent assurance panel work that we've pulled together. So what we've got here is the chair's final report and recommendation. So I will come to you, Caroline, as the chair, for you to sort of introduce your report and anything you wish to say, and obviously then the force can respond accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you everyone for your audience. So I'm Caroline Kilevy. I'm the chair of the Violence Against Women and Girls Assurance Panel, working on behalf of the Police Crime Commissioner. Just wanted to give you an overview of the report, really. The Violence Against Women and Girls Assurance Panel was established in July 2022 by the Crime Commissioner, with the objective of basically helping the force. Actually, it is to scrutinise the force's actions, to strengthen and improve public confidence in policing, to suggest actions or improvements that might improve the performance of the force in this area, and then to assist the Police and Crime Commissioner in ensuring any recommendations made are acted upon. And that's what today's about, really, is to have the discussion around the recommendations and to hear the force's response to that. The panel consisted of 10 professionals drawn from a range of relevant sectors, including academia, the criminal justice system, education, and of course, those sectors currently representing and supporting women through a range of direct services. Since July 2022, the panel met formally with representatives from Lincolnshire Police on 4 occasions, each spending kind of several hours discussing and scrutinising plans and priorities and actions and data. I should at this point out formally thank Detective Superintendent Suzanne Davis, the Force VAWG lead, and Sarah Norburn, who's the Domestic Abuse Coordinator, but currently on secondment to the National VAWG Task Force group. They had such an open manner in which they worked with the panel, and Detective Superintendent Davies worked hard to ensure the panel had access to all the information requested and facilitated a wide range of speakers from the force to enhance our understanding and the depth of knowledge. I'm grateful for all the time that all of those officers and employees who participated in one of those meetings, and they're all listed on page 2 of the report. Lincolnshire Police fully engaged and cooperated with the panel's work. The force closely aligns its plans with the recommendations contained in the College of Policing National VAWG Delivery Framework published in December 2021 and the Outcomes and Performance Framework in April 2022. And the panel found that actually the force had extensive plans and programmes underway in all aspects of the delivery framework. In terms of strategic commitment, the Lincolnshire Police appears to be largely effectively resourcing and prioritising VAWG actions at a senior and strategic level within its resources that's available. We accept that actually with more resources, the force could do more in this area, but I guess that goes for every area that the force is responsible for. Strategically, the force continues to benefit from a respected and knowledgeable and dedicated senior VORG lead. And the VORG lead is working collaboratively and effectively with community partners to deliver the force plan. There is a large range of operational and strategic programmes and tactical plans underway. And here is my first recommendation, actually, is that actually there perhaps is an overwhelming amount of initiatives and programmes underway. And sometimes it was quite hard for the panel to see the wood for the trees. Lincolnshire Police VORG Delivery Group, with membership of skilled and experienced members within the force and external to the force, continues to meet and is well attended by key tactical leads across the force. Lincolnshire Police have published its commitment and plans regarding to VORG prominently on its website, and actually does obviously work quite comprehensively in terms of getting communications out there to the general public, particularly in relation to national initiatives that have come from within the force elsewhere. The panel has been pleased to note the strategic resources have become available for an appointment of a dedicated RASO, a Rape and Serious Sexual Offences Detective Inspector, this year. But what more can be done at a strategic level? Well, the panel has heard that a multi-sector domestic abuse perpetrator programme no longer exists in Lincolnshire and is much needed. And I'd be interested to hear from the Chief Constable about what their plans might be to reinstate this perpetrator programme. In terms of measurement and impact, somewhat understandably, the force has spent a considerable amount of time consolidating and gathering data to fully establish the extent and nature and scope of the problem of VORG in Lincolnshire. This exercise has been somewhat frustrated and confused by the publication of a national problem profile data earlier in the year that was highly restricted in its nature and incomplete. Therefore, what more can be done? The panel recommends that Lincolnshire Police explores other methods of benchmarking its progress and impact against other forces, aside from relying against national data packs, which we felt tended to slow the process down a little. In relation to public trust and confidence, the panel was informed that some locally commissioned research with regard to public levels of confidence and trust has been commissioned, and in fact the results are now available. The panel would be interested to hear what the results of that are, very specifically in relation to the public trust and confidence at a VORG level. Because actually what we found was there was a lot of kind of more generic questions being asked around public trust and confidence of Lincolnshire Police Force. But actually what was really important for us was to really understand the views of women and how safe they were feeling in their communities. The panel were concerned and looked in some considerable detail around the impact of young people, and are very keen for the force to have some impact on the next generation's behaviour. And we were interested to hear about the work of the dedicated education programme that actually has been additionally invested in this year. Because of the rise in misogyny and anti-female narrative online, the panel was heartened to note the appointment of a dedicated VORG specialist youth worker in September 2023. But the panel had not seen evidence of systems or benchmarks in place to effectively measure the impact of the VORG schools education work going forward, possibly because it's a very new area of work. So the panel would recommend that actually some measurement impact process is put in place, and that data is also published to the general public. The panel was heartened to see the establishment of the VOIG Voices, the Lived Experience Consultative Group, over the last year and a half, and it appears to be working exceptionally well to make sure that the voices of women and those affected by VORG have been actually taken effectively into the force decision-making process. Members feel heard and respected and genuinely feel their input is helping to affect change within the force and in the community. What more can be done? We feel the commitment to engage Black and minoritized women and girls is clearly stated within the Force Action Plan, but the Force recognise that there is still more to do to really properly understand how this can be done properly and in a deeper way. Further thought is needed, and I'd be interested to hear what the Chief Constable would say about that. In relation to internal culture and the internal culture stocktake, much conversation at the panel meetings were taking place around kind of the culture and how actually members of the force were best prepared to deal with the things in the community that they were going to have to deal with. And so this area of work really started to look at areas of perhaps unconscious bias, whether people were effectively trained internally, and also what members of the kind of the force, the officers and employees themselves felt about what it was like to work within the force. The panel observed that there is evidence of significant discrepancy between the views of male and female personnel internally with regard to the existence of a positive culture. And whilst we accept that actually this is a journey, I would hope that actually the force have some plans to accelerate the coming together of those opinions going forward over the next couple of years. With regard to unconscious bias, the panel recommends a whole-scale programme of detailed unconscious bias training, not just at trainee level, not just through the induction of the officers, and that is an ongoing process, that actually people are sense-checked every year about whether they actually have some unconscious bias there, particularly with relation to VORG. It's particularly important. A lot of women that actually come forward feel that they don't want to report some things because they don't feel like they're actually going to be taken seriously. And I believe that actually really that needs to be discussed with officers on an ongoing basis. Victim disengagement. The panel has heard that further work to more effectively measure victim disengagement and determine what additional support victims can be provided with needs to be underway. The panel recommends that consideration be given to some external third-party analysis of victim disengagement throughout a handling of a case, not just at the end of a case. And trauma-informed approach. The panel believe more can be done to ensure all frontline officers become experts in trauma-informed handling of victims. We understand that is part of a routine training programme, but again, we think that actually that could have quite a significant effect in terms of building trust and confidence out in the public if every single frontline officer became an expert in trauma-informed handling of victims, specifically in relation to VORG. The panel recommends that more strategic partnerships are established with the NHS and other statutory non-for-profit partners to develop a county-wide VORG partnership strategy. Over the last year or so, we've heard a lot about all the great actions that are taking place within the force and the great partnerships that are underway. What we feel, though, that actually that is very much focused on crime, and whilst we feel that actually that is absolutely the right thing to do, and perpetrator focus really needs to be the forefront of all the actions. We do believe that actually by greater strength, stronger partnership with other agencies that might have an interest in this work, that actually the county might make better progress. In summary, the panel have been extensively impressed by the rigorous and expert manner in which the Lincolnshire Police VORG plan has been developed and implemented across the force. Panel members accept that there is still much to do to embed a newly focused culture, new systems, new reporting, measurement mechanisms, but the progress made to date should be applauded. The panel recommends that the force now consider what can be done to keep momentum. Given the sheer range and number of initiatives over the past 10 months, and still a lack of clear and easily understood, we did this was the effect type performance data, there is a danger of internal VORG fatigue. And the panel would welcome the Chief Constable's views on how he will ensure this doesn't happen. I think I'm going to pause there. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Caroline. Really appreciated. Just before I let the force comment on those. I think it's worth commenting on the first thing that you mentioned there, which is the perpetrator program. We had a perpetrator program which did attract some external funding, which we were able to set up. And obviously we always knew that was time limited funding, as often we get from government, rather than forever funding. And I think it's fair to say we would all recognise the need for a perpetrator program, but I do see this very much as a partnership approach. So this will include other partners such as Lincolnshire County Council, for example. So I am committed to making sure we find an appropriate route to deliver a perpetrator programme. Those discussions need to be had with colleagues at county and other places. And I'm sure the force will want to be part of that conversation, but I sort of don't want to put it on the chief's toes exclusively to try and suggest that should be a force-led issue. I think that is one of those true partnership areas. So I would hope that we'll be able to report back to the public about progress made in that space, but it is something I feel that we do need to deliver as sort of quickly and appropriately as possible. But over to you. I don't know whether it's you, Chris, or Julia that's going to respond initially, but over to you.
Okay, I'll respond initially and try and pick up on the specific points that Caroline asked for my views on, and then I'll come back to Julia, because I think Julia's had more input in pulling together the response to the panels and the chair's recommendations. But first thing is thank you, because I think we've found the report to be extremely helpful and has reassured us to some extent that we're doing the right thing, but also given us clarity of direction for what we do next, and where we need to focus some of our time. So it's been a really helpful report. So thank you, Caroline. And it will be used. And I know when Julia comes in, she'll basically go through and go, yes, we agree, yes, we agree, yes, we agree, we'll do that, we'll do that. There's very little in it that we would say, well, actually, we don't agree with that. There's probably bits where we'd probably say we are already doing it, but nothing we particularly disagree with. But the last question you asked was about VORG fatigue. I think it's always a challenge with any programme and project and initiative that is being run. But we link the whole of the VORG agenda into our force values and culture. So it's not seen as a standalone. This is about how we are as an organisation and who we are as people within the organisation. So it always comes back to our values around courage and fairness and inclusivity, and other initiatives and programmes around being an upstander, not a bystander, and making sure that we have lived experience being used to inform the agenda, but also using that lived experience to tell the story of what it feels like, both with our own internal people and external advocates as well. So it keeps it very real in the minds of our officers and our staff, and keeps this pushing forward. Within leadership seminars as well, we always have something to do with VORG on there. And at the more recent ones, when I've been speaking, I'm always quite clear about where I see the biggest challenges for policing in the future, which is very much about public confidence, public assurance that we are there to support people, and we will do it in a fair and open way. And a lot of that stems back to the incidents elsewhere in the country that led to VORG becoming such an important issue, and we can't lose sight of that, because otherwise we'll take ourselves backwards 10 years or more. So it remains a real focus for the force, and will do moving into the future. And I think that then comes to the heart of that culture piece that you ask, and about unconscious biases. We do a lot of work around our culture and our cultural stock take to understand where we are as a force. We will look at the unconscious bias training. We already do some. I wonder whether there's more that we can do there, and make sure that we keep pushing that forwards, and making sure that we do that from an internal and external perspective. So whilst we've got some in place, I think there's more that we can probably be doing. Specialist trauma informed care, I think, was another one you wanted my view on. And we have trauma informed training, but there's still more, again, I think we can do here. about redesigning our initial investigation process for victims of rape and serious sexual assaults, and just building in that trauma element to it. And there's probably something we can do, not just from a personal training point of view, but from an IT point of view, about reminding officers about some of the checkpoints and indicators really about trauma and how to deal with it. And there was one final bit, I'm just trying to remember, it was something to do with the difference between male and female responses, and the importance of the whole workforce, and making sure that we get that across. And again, that's part of the training and the leadership days that we do as well. So we are aware of that, and we are aware that there is a slightly different view between our male female colleagues, and it's something that we need to keep looking at and trying to make sure again that those lived experiences are fed in there. So, but overall, I think that we've really welcomed this report, and I echo your words about Suzanne Davis. I think she's been excellent in this field, and has done an incredible job. And I think Lincolnshire are probably right up there with the best in the country in terms of our approach to VAUG at the moment, thanks to Suzanne. Still a lot we can do. And I think the panel contributes hugely to that. So thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Caroline.
Yes, thank you for that, and that all seemed very sensible responses. And thank you for your reassurance regarding the training, the unconscious bias elements. I think anything that the force can do to heighten both of those areas of work internally would be great. I just an additional kind of suggestion really. I make the point about the difference between male and female views internally. Not specifically to do with the force, actually, because I think this is a society-wide issue. But I would absolutely recommend that you find an organisation that you could benchmark against, and I would suggest that you do that of a similar organisation size rather than sector. Because I think that would really help you understand your place as an employer within Lincolnshire, rather than as a police force. And I think sometimes with culture we need to sense check against those unexpected partners in society. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. And we can pick that up. And I think it's something, I don't know whether you're aware, but we've just been nominated or been awarded for being in the top 50 most inclusive employers in the UK. So it is something we are benchmarking against other agencies, other companies outside of our sector, just to see where we're at. That's not necessarily about VAUG, but actually we could factor in VAUG to some of that consideration as well, and see which other companies are up there as best in class, and how we compare against them. Thank you. Julia, did you want to come in on any of the other points within there?
I mean, I don't know whether we wanted to go through the recommendations one by one. It might take us a little while, but just to reiterate what you said in a way, Chris. So thank you, Caroline, for the report. It is really helpful. So just by way of sort of further context, I'm the regional chief officer lead for VAUG as well. So what that means is I chair all of the regional sort of leads, all of the regional Suzannes, although actually there aren't Suzannes in the same guise, because not all forces have put dedicated resources in to do this as their sort of day job. But I'm the conduit from the national team into the regional team and into forces to make sure that we're delivering and that we're identifying best practice and all of that kind of stuff. So it's an area of work that's kind of really close to my heart. And I think what's really helpful, and I think, you know, Suzanne has done a great job, and I think the commitment that we've got here in Lincolnshire, you know, isn't reflected in every single force. So I think that's strength. I'm grateful that you've picked up on that. I think what you've also picked up on actually is the progress of VAUG over the last kind of 18 months nationally. So I think, because I think it's been a thing that's not always all that tangible to say what is the thing that we're talking about. And I think you've picked up the change in terms of the plan. So we've had the delivery plan, and we'd had the pillars and the strands, and we'd built a delivery plan again around that, and we've got an awful lot of activity going on, which is delivering an awful lot of good work. But then nationally, based on the STRA and based on some different approaches, you know, this is now changing into a different delivery plan. I know I can see from the report, you know, concerns that we're going to lose momentum, and I think that's very wise counsel in terms of don't spend all your time sort of rejigging the way it looks, actually keep doing the doing. And just to assure you, you know, we are really firmly doing the doing. So in terms of the investment that we're making around the dedicated RASO inspector, in terms of some of the training that we'll have in hand, so we will have more of the first responder training. There's new training coming out for first responders, which is very much trauma informed, and this is all coming through the Opsiteria route. So Opsiteria, which is the rape investigation route, has developed alongside the wider VORG piece and is now being sort of subsumed within it. So there's quite a lot of additional investment going in and new work that will come into play throughout the coming months that will mean we won't be losing our focus on the things that really matter. So it is really helpful. I mean, the only other wider context piece just to sort of take into account is and I know you're looking at this specifically from a VORG point of view, but just linking into Chris's thing around the wider cultural piece, and just understanding this is about, you know, the confidence both internally and then externally, but certainly internally, the confidence to stand up and be an upstander and not a bystander, and that is equally relevant for VORG as it is for work that's underway in the Police Waste Action Plan and work underway in wider organisational culture. So that's where to try to deliver something that people don't get tired of hearing about VORG, actually bringing it into that culture piece, which is very enduring. And VORG will be enduring, but because of what it is, because of the sexual offences and domestic abuse and dealing with offenders and public confidence. But actually tying this into our wider cultural piece is an important part for us to make sure that it's really landing with people and resonating with people. So that was just a bit of additional context. I don't know whether, Commissioner, you wanted me to. I mean, we've obviously supplied a written response to the report, and I don't know whether you wanted me just to walk us through that at all, or whether you wanted to ask any specific questions in response to it.
No, well, we will obviously make sure that the responses are all put on the website along with the report, so anybody who wants to see the detail can do that. And I think, as we've already said, the important thing is this isn't a moment in time. This is a moment in time we're taking to look at the journey that's ongoing, and I think that's really important to note. So we're not at the end point of something. We're very much sort of looking to support the force in the fact that we know that there's a lot of work ongoing. So if there's anything in particular you want to sort of pull out, highlight, anything that you want to say, absolutely great. But you know, it will be an ongoing discussion, I know. So if there's any, but I'm happy for you to pull out anything from your comments that you've made in the response.
I think looking at them, we've probably covered them actually in some of the discussion that we've had, but I don't know whether there was anything that Caroline would want any further, expanding on. I think the Chief has picked up a couple of bits and I've picked up bits, but I don't know if there's anything, and I think the key points have been covered. But if there's anything that you'd like clarity on, Caroline, very happy to answer.
Can I come in here, Mark? Is that okay? Lovely, thank you, Julia. I appreciate that. I think that this, I'm a big believer of some kind of deadlines and some dates for some things, and I suppose there's just a couple of things around your intentions on when you might kind of make some things published in the general kind of domain. I think you've commissioned a VORG and serious violence survey, which received nearly 3,000 response, and you're intending to do a kind of you said we did approach when you published that information. When is it likely that might be available?
I don't know the answer to an actual date. I've not got an actual date to give you. So I know there's conversations being had through the VORG Voices panel, I believe, just in terms of how that is published and the most appropriate way of communicating some of that data. So but Joe's got a hand up.
Thanks, I might be able to help on this one. So we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with partners where we reviewed the data. We'd had a presentation of the findings at a high level from the survey provider, which were really useful. But what we all agreed was the actions that need to be taken forward sit in a number of different places. So we had a meeting with colleagues to look at, for example, some of the work would be best taken forward through the Domestic Abuse Partnership Board. And the DA lead wants to drill down into that information more specifically. I think you mentioned earlier, Caroline, about understanding the specific Vogue responses to questions. And that was part of the answer, because some things came out about men and boys, things came out about women and girls, some weren't across the whole geography of Lincolnshire, some were more specific. So we've kind of divvied up, for want of a better word, all of the responses, looked at where they would best sit and where we need additional information, and then that will be coming through as an action plan. And we already from that meeting took some high level, you said we did. So I would say early in the new year is when we said we're going to start communicating that, so probably mid-January onwards. But that will be the initial response with the, here are our quick wins, things we're already doing, so people can see that we're responding to what they've said. And then there will be a longer term plan around some things that might need a bit further consideration or a bit more work for us to get there.
Thanks, Joe. Chris?
Yeah, thank you. And just building on what Joe said, and what Julia said actually around Vogue voices, but also since the last set of feedback, so not this time around from the panel, that the Vogue communication strategy being much more focused on local communications and bespoke communication. So Suzanne's got quite a lot of plans with local radio stations targeting different demographic groups, as well as some social media campaigns to be done. And I think there's a Crime Stoppers campaign in February next year that will come out as well, just again encouraging reports, particularly with Eastern European communities. So there's quite a lot of reach out at the moment. I suppose it's the, when do we get the information out about the 3,000 responses, what that means to us from the survey and what we're going to do with it. But I think knowing Suzanne and knowing what she did last year after the feedback in from February, or this year, sorry, feedback from February, she'll be looking at her comm strategy as a result of that and then building that in. And there's probably quite a lot to do actually around the Vogue framework as well, and tying things in with getting more information out about what the new Vogue framework looks like after this month. Okay.
Thanks. Caroline?
Yes, thank you, Mark. So just a question. I think within my report presentation that I picked up that actually the education work that you are doing in Lincolnshire is exceptional, and I've seen obviously some more recent things around knife crime on in the social media. I think it is exceptional, and your investment in Vogue in your education programme, I guess, is also kind of groundbreaking. I would be keen though to understand how you're going to measure the success of that, and your work with the under 18s I think is really important in terms of how we really move this on for the next generation. So perhaps Julia, you might be able to answer that one for me.
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, because some of this is really, really difficult to measure, isn't it? And this is about measuring, you know, we can evaluate training input, but it's about measuring the impact, and measuring the impact on young people that might be an impact 4 or 5 years down the line. You know, it is you know, very, very difficult. There's proxy measures in place, and there's nothing come out of the national framework, just to help with this. There's nothing come out of the national framework that gives us the thing that we will be measuring. Measurements in terms of the national framework are in line with, you know, volumes of crime. Well, we know, and volumes of reporting. Well, we know actually that increased volumes of reporting can be down to increased confidence. So it is, you know, a tricky and it is not always a tangible thing that can be measured. But I think that doesn't mean to say that it's not the right thing to do, to go and do those educational inputs, to get that feedback and actually be prepared to wait for the longer term view, and wait for the longer term, you know, which could actually be an increase in reporting, could be a success factor.
This could be an area where you could perhaps draw two of the recommendations together, which was a greater need for partnership actually out there in the community, because I strongly believe that if you were to ask a very specific question about the majority of kind of young women and how safe they feel, either online or in fact, in terms of their understanding even what a crime actually is, I guess that information would be really interesting to feed back into your programmes. From what the panel have seen at the moment, the questions around public confidence, around public safety, quite generic questions around the general work of the force. And I think we really need to kind of just segment down. And the younger generation for me is absolutely where we need to focus, around attitudes, around what young boys are feeling around this area too. And this could be a really strong area for you to work in partnership in the community with other like-minded organisations.
Yeah, and I think there is a real opportunity to do that. I think there is, real opportunity to look at that specifically and say, right, how might we? But again, it's not going to be, we've done it this month and we're going to see the results in 3 months' time. But I agree. I think there is some opportunity there, so that's really helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. I think that's had a good sort of back and forth there, really. I know that we'll come to it again. Jo.
Thanks, Mark. I just wanted to make the point as well that whilst you commissioned this report to look at the work of the force, a lot of this is in the partnership space, which is an area that I know that you direct the office to focus on. And some of the recommendations, for example, Caroline mentioned confidence in the criminal justice system. And there is some work being taken forward now through the Criminal Justice Board, which is chaired by jointly by Nikki Mayo and Deputy PCC even, Phil Clark, looking at victim satisfaction with the criminal justice system and looking at that as the entire pathway, because obviously the force have one role to play in that, but it's multifactorial as to whether someone feels that was a positive experience at the end of it. So that work's being progressed. And then will be a paper going to the March meeting, pulling together a number of different strands that we've been looking at around victim satisfaction.
Excellent. Thanks, Jo. Julia.
Yeah, and sorry, just to add into that, sorry, I know you're looking to move on, but that will be reflected in the national stuff that's coming through. Again, the VORG agenda nationally. There's obviously the obsteteria work and the commitments there and the criminal justice side of the house there. But there's also the joint domestic abuse action plan, which is looking to develop in the same way as the obsteteria piece of work. So again, that's all around making the criminal justice process more perhaps user friendly, but for victims of serious sexual offences and domestic abuse. So some of this, from a national perspective, is about tying it all up and making sure locally that that's being driven in a way that is really coherent and as one package rather than as a number of different strands.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I'm sure we'll come back to this as an ongoing piece of work, but thank you, Caroline, both to you for leading on this, but also for the panel and all of their work. It's been really important to sort of have that external stakeholder voice in supporting our ability to sort of look at what the force has been doing. As you've said, they've done an incredible amount, really great work, often sort of very much at the forefront of what's happening nationally. So it is great that Lincolnshire's been in that position, and it is testament to the force leadership that has happened in that way. And a special thanks to Suzanne Davies, who's been leading on it here in Lincolnshire. But thanks for joining us today, Caroline, much appreciated. And we will move on to our next item, which is the performance dashboard. Now, I know, Chief, you're with us, is it for another few minutes? But you've got to go.
Probably 10 to 15 minutes tops, yeah. And then I'll have to go. But so if I introduce this and then so I'm going to do a little bit of the proactive, this is what we're about at the moment, and then leave Julia to do some of the detail. I'll stay for as long as I can, but with my apologies if I suddenly just disappear. So if I just concentrate, as I say, on some good news and some work that's going on. First piece is really around Operation Rudolph. The clue is in the title. So this is our crime prevention campaign through the winter period, looking at opportunistic crime, just making sure that we keep people safe. Obviously Christmas can be quite rich pickings for that opportunistic criminal. So our neighbourhood policing teams, as well as plainclothes officers, are patrolling Lincoln city centre. They're engaging with businesses and trying to take action if alerted to any offending. And again, supported by response officers, dog units and tactical teams where needed. So too early to say what that's going to mean, but we hope it will have a positive impact, not just on crime figures, but also on confidence around our retail environment within the city. We've also been involved in Operation Calibre recently, which has been more about the personal robbery element of it and personal robbery prevention. Good news around this is Lincolnshire are one of the safest counties in the country around this. So we have about 0.5 personal robbery crimes per 1,000 population, compared to a national average of 1.3 per 1,000. But again, it's such a personal crime that it can be very traumatic to the individual. So some really good work around that and just keeping people safe in the community. We've just started Operation Nutcracker, which is looking at county lines in Sleaford. So this is about county lines drug dealing. There are a small number of younger people, teens into early 20s, who appear to be involved in county lines drugs provision in that area and across the county. So we are targeting that area at the moment. Again, too early to say what the results will be, but we're working with various partners, not just policing partners, but local authority, care providers and others, to try and eradicate the problem and allow people a diversionary route out. Operation Safe Night in Lincoln City has started. Again, partnership approach, trying to keep people safe during the evening while they're out having a drink or a meal. That seems to be going very well, looking at providing reassurance, stopping violent crime and identifying and preventing predatory behaviour where it's prevalent. This has been something that worked really well in the summertime policing campaign over on Skegness, where instead of officers standing waiting for fights and things like that and public order patrols, actually their briefing now is to, when they see young people or young ladies in particular who may be inebriated with somebody who doesn't quite look like they fit together, is actually to go and inquire and ask, who are you with, why are you with them, and where people give an unsatisfactory response, is to take some action there and step in and protect those people. And it worked very, very well, with a significant drop in sexual violence in the summertime over on Skegness. And we hope that we'll see a similar kind of response in the city over the Christmas period. So some good work going on there. The drink drive campaign for December has started. Again, we do see an uptick in drink driving at this point, and we know that drink driving contributes to fatal collisions. 41 of those over the past year have been as a result of drink or drug driving. So we will be taking some positive action where we come across that. And we're currently coming towards we are at the end of the 16 days of action around domestic abuse, which has been very much linked to what we've just been talking about with Caroline, around violence against women and girls, and raising awareness of the support that's available and encouraging victims to stand up and speak out, and the journey for the victim through to survivor and thriver, as the phrase goes. So lots and lots of work around that. And the final piece I'd say as well is we will be, we've just launched we've had the happening preview prior to the launch of it. And as you know, Commissioner, this is an immersive educational experience aimed at diverting young people away from carrying knives or bladed instruments. And we'll be working with our schools across the county and hopefully will make a big difference in terms of reducing violent crime. So again, it goes back to the first piece about how do we engage young people, how do we build confidence with young people. This is an example of how we're doing it. And I've already mentioned the final piece about performance, which is less operationally focused but more internally focused, is we've been listed in the top 50 most inclusive companies in the UK. Again, that's the second year in succession. And our dyslexia team were shortlisted into the last 8 out of over 1,000 nominations for the work that they've done in supporting people who may have dyslexia or other learning abilities or disabilities, and how that we can support them in the workplace. So I think given the amount of submissions and the size of the force and the size of that team that we have, that's an incredible achievement on their behalf. So some really good news there as well. So that's the kind of oversight from me. If I hand on to Julia, she can take you through the performance framework.
If I'll just comment on a couple of bits that you've said there before you shoot off. I mean, it is a really good thing that we're recognised nationally as an inclusive employer. I think that is an important thing to be celebrated. I think as well, the work that the force has done about neurological diversity in its workforce and understanding of those that are neurologically diverse across the county is really important, and I think it will make a difference to an awful lot of people. And I think it is something that isn't talked about enough, not just here, but just nationally. I think the forces across the country could learn an awful lot from what Lincolnshire's doing in this space. So I think that is to be commended as well. The other point I would mention that you've not yet mentioned on there is something that you're doing that's hot off the press, really, which is the work that you've done to sort of try and raise the knowledge and awareness around when it's appropriate and when not appropriate to use e-scooters, and particularly to sort of be advising parents of the fact that these are not legal on our roads, and they need to be mindful of spending hundreds of pounds on things for their young ones that potentially might end up being seized if they're used inappropriately. And if I look at some of the statistics, Bedfordshire, for example, has been one of those pilot areas where they've been trialling the hiring of e-scooters, and since 2021 the statistics are quite stark. So of those incidents where a collision or an incident has happened with a car, 14% of those incidents that are reported to the police have resulted in a serious or fatal injury, 16% with vans, 31% with e-scooters. So of those incidents reported to the police, 31% have ended with a serious or fatal incident in Bedfordshire, where those trials have continued. They are not as safe as some people would have you believe. And that's before you get into the question of, are they actually a safe thing that you've bought? We've had a trading standards case in Lincolnshire very recently where it was clear that the equipment itself was not fit for the British market and was at risk of catching fire. So I think all the work that's being done there to protect people around the county on that as well should be commended. So thank you for your efforts in raising that with the public.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Commissioner. And I'll just come back on a couple of bits there. Not in terms of pushing back, but the most inclusive employer piece. And I know some people will always ask the question, well, why does that matter, and why is it important? That's an internal thing, and why are you wasting your time doing that? Well, actually, if we have a strong, inclusive, understanding culture in the force, then actually we will provide better service, and we will understand our communities better, and we'll be more empathetic to their needs, and we'll be able to listen more, and we will also have the lived experiences within force that will help to inform our policy and practice in the future. So I think it's a really critical piece of work that we have to do alongside our culture, and goes to the heart of a lot of what we've spoken about today. So thank you for recognising that. And yeah, and I think I would also be remiss here of not speaking up on behalf of my fire colleagues who share the building with us about e-scooters and e-bikes as well. And just a word of caution to people who may be thinking about these for Christmas is think about what you're going to use them for. think about where you're sourcing them from and whether they're fit for the UK market, as you say, and some of the risks that come with that, because the fire service are very concerned about the fire risk of some of the batteries that are being put onto these non-UK specific bikes and scooters. And there is very much a concern here that lives will be lost if people aren't careful. So I just echo that one from you, Commissioner.
Thank you for that. Julia, over to you.
Okay, just checking, am I sharing my screen? Okay, marvellous. Okay, let's see if this is going to move. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to try to share and take us through the slides. So the content slides I won't talk to. Introduction, just a reminder that this particular data pack that we're looking at takes us on the whole to 12 months to September. There are a couple of bits in there where it's later data than that, but on the whole, that's the period that we're looking at where there are comparisons being made. And just in here, just a reminder for anybody watching online that this is the 4 strategy with the 3 sort of strategic objectives there. And then into our performance priorities. So again, this is just for anybody watching this starting afresh, that these are the areas that we kind of identify as being the things that we're really looking to improve performance around and use our resources to focus on. Okay, so just getting into some of the performance overview then. Bits, and I know there are slides later on, but bits that I wanted to pull out of this particular slide is 999 calls and the volume of 999 calls. So you will see there just that sort of second line down that's in the red. You'll see, we continue to experience really significant rises in the 999 volume. So we're 10% up from where we were year on year, which amounts to a 24% increase in terms of pre-COVID. Now, I know at some point we will stop talking about COVID and the COVID sort of baseline, but this is still used as a national baseline for us. So it does seem sensible just to still keep using that. We do recognise that I think, crime and types of crime were really quite significantly impacted on by COVID, and obviously contacts and calls to the police and the way that people interact with the police were significantly impacted by COVID. So for the time being, we are choosing to carry on making that comparison. At some point this must stop, but we're probably not quite there yet. But I just did want to flag that significant increase in the volume of 999 calls, which we're really trying to understand exactly what that is. So there is an element, some of these are not true calls, so their phones going off in people's pockets, but actually quite a high volume are real calls and are not actually crimes, but are around concern for public safety type incidents. So that was just to flag that. But then really just going on from that, looking at the call handling answered in 10 seconds. So we're still a really, really strong performer nationally around our 999 performance. And I won't dwell on it any more than that, but other than to say, we have had a significant increase. We continue to have this high level of 999 calls, but our performance remains really strong. And I think that's what the public would expect of us. And it is certainly what we prioritise. So just moving on then, other bits I was just going to pull out on this slide was an improvement in the 101 calls. Whilst we had a reduction overall in 101 calls, that's the non-emergency calls, you'll see that we've started to improve in our answering times. There's a slide further on in the pack that goes into a bit more detail, but and I know that the data has continued. I mean, the good news is that the data has continued to show an improvement. So I know this current month, the data is again, even better and improving further for 101 non-emergency calls. So I think the investments that we've made, both in the technology and in the people within the contact centre, has enabled us, even with that significant rise in emergency calls, which we will always prioritise. We are now seeing that improvement and uplift in 101. Not to where we want it to be just yet, but it is improving, and with more resourcing in there, you know, I'm really hopeful that the trajectory will continue to go upwards in terms of improvement. And then moving further down, I was just going to mention as well all recorded crime. So again, just on this chart here, that we'll see that all recorded crime, we are below where we were. So we've got a reduction. So one of the strategic objectives is obviously to reduce crime overall, and that we are meeting that objective. So crime has reduced, and compared to pre-COVID, it is also reduced. So I think some good news there. I'm not suggesting that everything is good news, but there is some real progress, I think, there. Moving on to this next slide. So these are sort of summary performance slides. I wanted to pull out from this one the drug offences. So you'll see, you know, quite a significant increase in terms of drug offences there, 20% on the last 12 months. Even although that is less on the pre-COVID baseline, and that's really down to an awful lot of drug enforcement activity, proactive operations that we've undertaken around county lines, Op Stabilise. We had a week of action in October, which actually won't be included in these figures, but an awful lot of drug-related activity, which leads to that uptake and upsurge in terms of offences recorded. So I'm just going to move on. If there's no questions, I'll keep a lookout for hands, but just moving on then to some good news stories, which we like to put in there, because whilst we're always focusing on what we can do better, actually sometimes we don't always take time just to celebrate what we do really, really well, and some of the successes that we've had over the past period. So you'll see some stories, some items there, some of the good news, and that is just a tiny proportion really of what people are doing on a day-to-day basis. So going on to a little bit more specific detail then. So in terms of the strategic objective around stopping crime and antisocial behaviour, as I've said, the good news is that crime overall is down. These tables show more of the detail of where crime has come down, and so just give that slightly wider context. What you will see that you've got a cross on this right hand side here, which is for theft of vehicle. So we have had, whilst neighbourhood crime overall remains lower than, certainly significantly lower than the pre-COVID period, what we will see here on the right hand side is that theft of vehicle, that there has been an increase, and that's out of tolerance. So the statistical tolerance that the analysts will look at to say, well, is that significant? And that theft of vehicle has flagged as being out of tolerance. So we've looked into that, and we know that there have been that was caused by a number of factors, including some cross force criminals coming across, and we had a series involving cross-border criminals, which we identified the perpetrators and people have been arrested for. We'd had some of the burglaries where people break into people's houses and steal the keys. Again, we had a series of those. Again, we've managed to arrest people for that. So where we'd had, this is where some of these theft of vehicles have come from, these particular crimes. We also had a spate of motorbike thefts in Lincoln, and again, we've had offenders arrested for that. So that's where that has flagged as out of tolerance. But because of that proactive activity and enforcement that we've undertaken, I'm expecting that will start to come back within tolerance levels. I think the important thing is that when we start to see a series of offending, or we start to see patterns of offending emerging, that we're picking that up in tasking and dealing with it, deploying resources so that we can stop that series from creating further harm. And then you'll see on that the theft from vehicle just below it is actually out of tolerance, but in a good way. So it's actually lower than we would expect it to be again, that is a good thing. Just coming down to the bottom, you'll see possession of weapons. So again, that's come out of tolerance. It's intolerance, but has shown a significant increase. So some of that has come from where we've had some importation offences. So quite a number of those offences were reported to us by third-party agencies, and Border Force notification in particular, that we had and hadn't been crimed. I think some of them actually had taken place last year but hadn't been crimed. So we've looked into that. It's not people out on the streets in larger numbers with weapons and sort of roaming the streets with weapons. It's actually where we've had some reports come to us late in the day. And then crimes against society, that's a whole array of different sorts of offending, including things reported from prisons and elsewhere, which again shows an increase, but there's no sort of particular pattern or area of concern come out of those. I'm conscious I'm talking on. Is there anything you wanted to come back to me on before I carry on to the next slide?
No, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, well, I will keep going then. So so next slide. I think we've already discussed the reduction overall. So good news here in terms of overall recorded crime. You know, really good news to see that going down. And next slide, we've got some of the tracking around violent crime. And so you've got violence with injury and violence without injury. So again, overall, within sort of variance, within tolerance levels, but a downward trajectory overall on the previous 12 months, which is good news. So still above the pre-COVID level, but actually, you know, we do know that there is a crime recording compliance factor in here as well. I don't want to have it both ways, but I think overall this is kind of good news for us. I've touched on this already, so I won't go through in lots of detail, but other than to say, again, this is your neighbourhood crime. So neighbourhood crime consists of your robbery of personal property, vehicle offences, theft from person, and then burglary residential. And again, you'll see within those areas some real sustained reductions, and particularly when you compare with the pre-COVID. And I think this is why it is still relevant to compare with pre-COVID, because I do think it, you know, that there has been a change in the way and the type of crimes that are committed. I think these are crimes that we do focus on. We focus a lot of prevention activity in. We do a lot of communication, you know, so residential burglary, we do lots of comms around that and try to help people to make sure they can keep their properties safe. But regardless of that, and regardless of all of that, you know, you look at the difference from pre-COVID where it's 20% down. Now, I know we have some difficulties in comparing this because of the change in the actual definition of burglary, but these are really significant reductions, I think, and the fact that we're sustaining them is really, really positive. I'm going to move on to this slide, and one area on here that I know is an area of focus for yourself, Commissioner, and is an area that we're continuing to develop is around the shoplifting. And I think the Chief had mentioned this earlier on in what he was discussing in terms of the operational plans that are in place now. But shoplifting, theft from store, we know nationally there's been some approach come out from the NPCC, and we're following that approach. We're following the plan, the Retail Crime Action Plan, which I think is where you know, there's been a sense that perhaps policing hasn't taken shoplifting, and particularly where there are repeat offences and violence used, that you know, there is a recognition that we need to deal with that really seriously. And actually, some of our uplift in robbery numbers we know are associated with people being detained in stores and demonstrating violence towards security guards. So with shoplifting, we've got one of our chief inspectors who has got the lead for that, and who is busily ensuring that we are focusing on those offences, focusing on attending actually where we've got that evidence, following that national plan, linking in with businesses. and also really trying to make sure that we're maximising the use of the criminal behaviour orders, so that we can prevent people, prevent people where we have caught them. We can apply conditions to them to try to manage their behaviour more effectively. So work ongoing. Theft from stores is never going to be our top priority, but I think we are trying very hard to provide a response to that, particularly in those areas where violence has been offered or they're repeat victims, that is providing that confidence to businesses. Okay, then I'm moving on to I don't know if my did I jump several forward? Sorry, I think I've jumped loads forward, haven't I? Did you jump me forward? Let me just go back. Okay, sorry. So next slide then. Positive outcomes. Again, really pleased actually that we are seeing an upward trajectory. So, but we're still not where I want us to be with this, but we are moving. Actually, if you look at the number of positive outcomes we've recorded in the last 12 months, they are 15% up on the previous 12 months. So we are achieving more positive outcomes. But that 15% in volume increase only amounts to a 1% increase in terms of the actual percentage of positive outcomes, if that makes sense. So I think again it's some of the green shoots here in terms of providing that outcome for the member of the public, for the victim, with an offender brought to justice. I think out of court disposals is a piece of work. We know we're still waiting for the national out of court disposal framework to come into place, but we do, I have asked us to be pushing harder on this locally so that we can try to increase the number of out of court disposals that we're using in appropriate circumstances. Okay, so antisocial behaviour, some really good work going on in our neighbourhood teams around ASB. We've got again downward trajectory in terms of incidents recorded for ASB. Something that obviously with our new neighbourhood model in place we will be monitoring really closely in local areas, but again I just think quite a positive news story there in relation to antisocial behaviour. Lots of really good problem solving going in place, and we expect that to continue into 2024. Rural crime action team. We've spoken at length around the rural crime team in previous assurance meetings. There's an awful lot on that slide to go through, but you can just see the reductions in hair coursing that are being maintained into this year. So these are stats that actually are up to the 17th of November. So these aren't September stats, these go up to November. You can see, again, hair coursing, is very topical at this time of year. This is when we do tend to get the real busy time, but you can see those numbers compared to previous years. And I really hope that is the deterrent effect that's been put in place through the proactive work of that really small team of people that we've deployed to tackle rural crime. And you'll see there some of the outputs, and it's nice to see that we've had 2 of the first people to be charged and sentenced under the new laws, and that they've been ordered to pay an equal share of the kennelling costs, £11,000 kennelling costs. So that's really good to see. So I think just a real success story. Okay, I'm going to move us on to. So these are the offences really that domestic abuse, rape, stalking, harassment that link very clearly into violence against women and girls sort of piece of work, and overall, whilst we have had an increase in the total number of rapes reported to us year on year, so we are up, It's really difficult to say that this is a good or a bad thing. We know these aren't non-recent rapes because we've had a reduction in non-recent rapes, but we do expect to see reporting increase when we have increased confidence to report. So we do expect to see increased numbers. So I suppose what I can reassure you about is this isn't a number of this isn't a series of rapes committed by one perpetrator who is out in the community. This is rapes that are, the proportions of rapes that are reported to us. This is still the same sorts of rapes that are being reported to us, but we're having more people come forward. Very often, people involved in relationships with, so it's either a domestic abuse rape or somebody that they have met whilst out, which is why we're doing all of that preventative work with the safeguard piece of work and the nighttime economy around Christmas. So I think it's actually a good thing that the rape figures have risen, because I do think that's a direct result of people feeling confident to come forward. But we do still monitor that to make sure that there's nothing in there that is a pattern that we need to be taking preventative or further action on. Okay, I'm going to move us on then. Mental health. I'm not going to go through everything on that slide, other than to say we are still, we do know, obviously, I alluded earlier on to the increase in 999 calls and the fact that we do know that a lot of that isn't crime, that it's people in distress and people, reaching out for services often related to mental health. Our demand is still high, but it is reducing, and I think that's really positive. And you'll know that we're really engaged with the piece of work around the right care, right person, to just work out how do we. Sometimes we will be the most appropriate agency to attend an incident, but how do we manage this ongoing demand and to make sure people are being dealt with in the right place. So lots of activity underway. Still really high numbers of 136 detentions. I still think that's quite high when you look at the numbers, but significantly lower than last year, but still significantly higher than the pre-COVID levels. This is a national, as we've discussed it many times before, this is national, a national theme, which is where working with the partners with the right care, right person, I think is really important, and making sure people can access services that are appropriate to them. So I shall move on. So again, this is just looking at road safety. We've invested in this road safety team, and pleasing to see that the killed and seriously injured is reduced on the previous 12 months. Relatively small numbers still, fortunately. We've actually now exceeded unfortunately the death numbers on our road, but the seriously injured remains lower than last year. Still out doing lots and lots. You can see the enforcement activity that's going on. Christmas drink drive campaign now starting. Lots going on, but unfortunately, yes, people still are being injured on the road, but at a lesser frequency. What is too many, but it's less than it was in the previous year. I wasn't going to talk through the firearms licensing. That's there. That just shows, I think, that we do know that we have an important shooting community locally, and actually being able to respond and deal with licensing applications and deal with any issues around firearms licenses as they crop up is really important, and that shows that we're very good at doing that. So just going back through, so I think we've already discussed the 999 performance, which remains very strong. I think the 101 we've discussed, and and I'm really pleased to say I know that is an upward trajectory. So hopefully when we get to the next PAM meeting, it would have maintained its upward trajectory, but really good news there. And I wasn't really going to talk through these slides particularly. They're there for information. They show what we probably already know, which is when we have the peak, peak call times. Looking at that 101 data, what we can say is during August, the snapshot in August, that on average we took 6 minutes, 12 seconds for a 101 call to be answered. There's still that conversation happening nationally to say, what should this be? What should the performance target be? So where we might want to answer it within 3 minutes, other forces take different views, and actually it does really impact on the resourcing that you put into the department. So we're doing a lot of work, as you know, around just with looking at reviewing our demand and incident data. But that was the performance for August, which I think obviously the 2 hours 54 is way out of whatever tolerance we would want to see. And then this slide just shows us some of the demand that's coming in on the over the single online home, so online reporting. So again, you'll see quite significant amount of demand. It's not up to the same level as the 101 or the 999, but it is still quite significant and gets routed across different parts of the force. Again, this is an area for the future that I would just really like us to be able to start analysing and tracking and thinking, can we do any of are there any efficiencies there for us that we could exploit, and also to make it the system more accessible for the public to do any self-service. And then just finally, the last slide or the last couple of slides, this is about our urgent response, which again, under review in terms of some of the national piece. We set ourselves 15 minutes and 20 minutes for our response times, so that has declined slightly. We know that we've had some issues around some of the resources available to us, and we're doing some work now just to understand that further. So there's been a bit of reduction in that response time, but overall, actually 88% responded to in 30 minutes for urban, and not dissimilar for rural. Is not where we'd want it to be, but actually still, I think, for a force like ours with our geography, it's not too bad. It's much as we would want it to be better than that. And then the last one is around the keeping people informed now, and user satisfaction. So we do know that, and again, this comes back to actually how we might in the future be able to automate some of this. We do think that we are keeping more people informed more than this, but it's just the fact that our data isn't pulling it out of the people aren't doing the right form on Niche or Pronto, so we're waiting for a fix on one of our IT systems to be able to make sure that we are tracking that more accurately. And it will help supervisors then to see whether people are doing those updates that they should be doing. So again, not where we'd want it to be at the moment in terms of the satisfaction around being kept informed. Overall satisfaction is slightly up, so I think that's again positive sign, but work to be done. And I think that probably takes me to the end of what I was going to say. Thank you, Commissioner.
No, thank you for that, and obviously comprehensive run through. I think the first thing to note in the general sense is that there's a lot more green on these charts than perhaps there has been over a number of years, and I think that there's all kinds of different reasons, as we know, but the way that we monitor this is probably these papers we look at, I think they're in a much better format than most other areas tend to look at them. So we're not literally looking month on month, is it up, is it down? It's looking over that longer period of trend, and I think that's a much better way of determining what's actually happening, and it's really good to see that what we've obviously had in place are a series of force strategic documents with operational plans underneath them that have then ultimately led to the action that's been taken, and we're now seeing that come through in the figures that we're looking at. So I think that is it's always the same. It takes time to change all of that, and I think it is really pleasing to sort of see that change. So I'm always conscious that if we're not careful, whenever we discuss these, it's by exception, and we're talking about the things that aren't working rather than in the round and going, well, actually, let's celebrate some of the really good work that is going on, because there's plenty there that I think we should be celebrating. obviously you alluded to vehicle theft, which is a concern, and I would throw into that one of the things that tends to be a seasonal challenge is around breaking of commercial vehicles like vans, for example, where tools are stolen, that kind of thing. And I guess it's one of those things of going, what more can we do collectively around that messaging to the public to protect them, whether that's from you know, the Hanoi burglaries, whether it's from van theft, whatever it happens to be. And I think it would be, I know there is prevention work that goes on, but it's those seasonal things that we know are always going to come up. In a couple of months, we know it will be shed theft because people will be breaking into sheds to steal things to then sell ahead of the spring and summer period. So it's those messaging that we maybe could get into a bit of a battle rhythm of providing the public in a timely way. These things happen at this time of year, and maybe here's some of the latest ways in which you can defend from that. So if there's anything I can do from my side to help support that messaging, and obviously in the partnership space, we'd be really keen to do that. As we know, prevention is always better than cure. It's better to avoid these crimes happening in the first place. So really keen to work with you on that. And one of the things that was raised with me the other day, particularly around the van break-ins, was where we get 2 or 3 in quick succession, whether how quickly the force actually try to look at it to determine whether that's a series rather than individual incidents. So something from you just to comment on that would be helpful, because I've had a number of residents who have suffered with those kind of crimes, and it was something that they were asking, well, is this just me, or the one that was 2 miles away, is it the same people? And how do you determine whether you're going to look at it as a broader sort of piece of work, which might obviously potentially lead to some different avenues of investigation? I think it is always difficult to tell with some of these numbers whether we consider them a good thing if they go up or not. Possession of weapons is obviously one of those. If we get a 16% rise, it would be concerning to people to think, well, does that mean there's more weapons? But actually, if it's a proactive piece of work by the force to make sure that we haven't got weapons on the street, then that is obviously a very positive thing. Business robbery is one of those things that continues to rise, and you know, it's not just a local thing, it's a national phenomenon, but a 43% rise in the last 12 months around that. So anything you can comment about what the force might be doing in that business robbery space would be really helpful. And that sort of fits into the shoplifting piece, because obviously if we've got a thriving economy with thriving businesses, then that's good for employment, it's good for people feeling and being safe, it improves a whole range of things. And it's obviously concentrating on those prolific offenders has been successful in Lincolnshire previously, and it's good to hear that there will be more work ongoing around the shoplifting piece, especially where there's threats of violence. And obviously that national commitment that Chief Constables have collectively made around following up reasonable leads of inquiry will play into that. And I think it's understanding what people can expect from that commitment, because if they've got, for example, CCTV, does that mean that it's now going to be more proactively looked at, where previously it mightn't have been as quickly actioned, maybe. So some comments on that would be really helpful. And obviously around drug offences, we're seeing a rise in drug offences and drug trafficking, which you know, obviously that means there's a more proactive approach, particularly around the drug trafficking. And I think it is right to see the force concentrate on the supply and trafficking of drugs as a way of keeping our communities feeling and being safer. So I would again commend you for an 83% rise in the last 12 months on the drug trafficking enforcement. I think that's a really important statistic. And certainly as I go around the county, I know the Chief mentioned it earlier with county lines in Sleaford, there are concerns in the community from often market town level areas, so Horncastle, Louth, Bourne, Spalding, Sleaford, Gainsborough, around drugs and antisocial behaviour. And I think some of this is trying to get across the message of what is being done, because there's clearly a lot of proactivity around drugs and antisocial behaviour. And obviously we will have some additional funding from April to put in place some additional support around antisocial behaviour. And I have already contacted the policing minister to request a meeting in January with the chief to discuss our broader funding envelope, which obviously, as we know, is always challenging in Lincolnshire. So anything we can do to bring in additional funding, which will help provide you more tools to do the job, is obviously a good thing. So apologies, there's quite a few different areas there which I've just sort of alluding to in the general sense, but if anything you want to add on those, that would be great.
Okay, so I'm going to start with as I wrote them down. So the van break-ins. So we should be picking them up through the daily scans of crime, and if a van was broken in sort of 2 miles apart from each other, unless there was a particular MO similarity, you know, if the same sort of same sort of stuff being stolen, then we might not pick that, you know, we might not link that as a crime. But through our daily monitoring of crime, and the analysts, they will be reviewing where crimes are taking place, and if it's vans, if it's theft of vehicles, if it's burglaries, whatever it is, that is being reviewed on a daily basis and would feature in the daily management meeting, either the force one or then the local level ones. And would then feed into the tasking process, which is where we start looking at, have we got a space of things happening that we need to deploy additional resource to? And you'll know that we have the sort of resources in the roads policing unit, in the rural crime team, in the tactical support team, that we've got this flexible, often already tasked, but we can reprioritise if we need to, assets that we can deploy, and you know, and they are very successful in getting those outcomes. So yes, we would be picking it up. If there's a spate, we would pick it up through our analytical work and through local officers having the data sitting on their, you know, the neighbourhood officers having the data available to them, so they can actually see themselves if they're experiencing a particular issue. So that does that answer that one for you, Commissioner? The next one is the business robbery, and so whilst I'm not for a minute wanting to belittle business, you know, what's happened, the 43% increase is a very small number. So the total number is 63 crimes, so it is a small number. I'm not wanting to belittle it, but we've obviously, because it is you know, that percentage of increase, we've looked into that, and we do know that this is on the whole violent shoplifters who have been detained. So this isn't you know, on the whole, people going in and, you know, this isn't people going and robbing the jeweller's shop. This is shoplifters who have been detained by security guards, then becoming violent, and that's where that's been reported as business robbery. So that's why we're doing that work with shops to in line with the national plan to really try to tackle that. And so going into the shoplifting piece, where we have CCTV, where there is evidence, where violence has been used, we are then expecting to attend to go and get that, so that we can get the best possible evidence and chance to apprehend the perpetrators, particularly as we know that many of these will be repeat offenders, and people that we really need to do some problem solving around. So yes, that is a change in terms of our approach to shoplifting. Any other questions on the business robbery or shoplifting? So just going into the drug trafficking and the rise in enforcement, again, it's a really positive thing, and we know from our neighbourhood policing engagement that, you know, a lot of concerns are around drugs. So we know that comes out in priorities from that engagement that we do in our neighbourhood. So I think the fact that we're trying to look at that exploitation, at those, you know, the trafficking is really positive. We know that, you know, when we do deal with issues, that we then do end up with new people coming in, and this is why we're doing some really excellent work in parts of the county, and I know you know, Boston's an area where we're really doing that clear hold build type approach, so trying to really deal with the problem, but then actually work with partners to provide that community resilience to stop the problem from coming back as far as we can. So I think that's an ongoing, you know, it's in all honesty never going to completely go away, but it's something that we should keep focusing on and trying to do the best we can for those communities and those vulnerable people involved. And then the last one, really, funding. I mean, anything we can collectively do to make the case for more money, to use that money tackling our priorities, I think. And I'm grateful for your comments about the you know, the greens on the charts and the performance regime we've got in place. I think we're really clear what we think our priorities are, and so I think we're really clear what we would do, you know, if we can get more resources. So anything you know, that we can support within in terms of that, and I know the chief will be fully engaged in that in the new year. So, and I think that was probably everything. I don't know if I've missed anything off.
No, I think it does. I mean, as ever, there's an awful lot going on, and you know, there's a never-ending list of things to be conscious of. I think it's fair to say that it's an interesting time with a new chief coming in. A new chief will have their own view on the direction of travel, and I'm sure it will be an evidence-based approach that they will want to take. So, you know, the work that the force undertakes, the work that these charts provide, does provide a lot of that evidence. So I would hope that you know, the good work that's ongoing will continue, and I'm sure it will. But I think it's you know, broadly very satisfying to see some of those areas moving in the right direction. I still think that user satisfaction piece is stubborn. It's been stubborn a long time, and you may well be right about, are we getting the data collection right? But I think we need to bottom this out. We need to be able to assure the public that, you know, the service that they should be getting, they are getting when it comes to that keeping informed. And if that is happening, but it's not being reflected in the figures, we need to find a way of making sure that it is fairly reflected. So you don't have me every single meeting saying we need to do better, when it could be, as a matter of fact, you already are. So, you know, I'm keen to find a way to do that. I think that's really, really important. But whether, Joe, have you got anything that you want to raise, ask?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Excellent. So at this point, there's nothing further I would want to ask. I think it's a case of we will get to our next meeting and then see where we get to from there. Okay. Excuse me, I'm literally just flicking between all the various papers. Okay. Well, if there's nothing further that anybody wishes to add, that does bring us to the conclusion of the meeting. So the only other thing I need to do is to wish everybody a very happy Christmas, and say that we obviously look forward to gathering again in the new year. Aubrey, have we already got a date for the next meeting?
We have indeed, Commissioner. It's scheduled for Tuesday, the 19th of March.
Wonderful, 19th of March. Okay, we will see everybody there. Thank you very much indeed.
Happy Christmas, everyone.